The UK economy is in one of the worst states it's been in quite some time. And I often don't make these kind of videos because they can come across as political, which is not my aim. One finance YouTuber, Sasha, has even made an entire channel focused on how bad the UK economy is. I mean, I'm not going to go that far, but I do think it's really important we have an open chat about what's going on at the moment, because there's a lot of complicated words being thrown around that most of us don't understand. A lot of really important things that just fly under the radar, and when they do happen, we get a huge shock that they've come out of nowhere. Now, let's talk about what sparked this video. A few things were bubbling along, which I'll get to shortly, but in particular, this lady resigned. Tulip Sadiq. She was forced to resign after weeks of media attention to her family's links to an anti-corruption inquiry in Bangladesh. She denied any personal wrongdoing, but quit to limit the damage to the government's reputation. And she was our pensions minister. Where's the problem in that, you might ask? Well, it's not to do with her, but her replacement. This chap, Thorsten Bell. Now, before I say this, I will say I do think he's a decent economist and he does have some good points. I'll actually link a good interview with him down below. In particular, I agree with his views on something he calls short-termism, which essentially talks about how we're so focused on quick fixes and battling governments, the bigger picture often gets overlooked. How one government is happy to just kick the ball down the road to the next, rather than working together. He talks about how nuclear plants were needed in the time of Nick Clegg, which were pushed away and are still needed to be built today. So if he seems good, then why might he be a problem? Well, he was a chief executive of the Resolution Foundation for the past 9 years. The Resolution Foundation are somewhat of a very left-wing think tank who have come out with some quite radical ideas. You might remember their famous white paper, ISA, ISA Baby. This paper had some controversial points about ISAs, 3 in particular. So in their research, they said that increases in the ISA annual allowance have not led to noticeable improvements in aggregate household savings. For instance, when the allowance was raised between 2013 and 2015, there was no significant impact on overall saving rates, questioning the efficiency of such policy measures. So there's no real point increasing the limit to them, which most of us would like, although realistically the vast majority can't afford to hit that number anyway. I certainly won't this year. I mean, the problem there to me lies with we shouldn't technically be filling our ISAs. It's just that the benefits of the SIP versus the ISA aren't fully clear. You actually get better returns from the SIP in the long run. Now, this is where it gets more juicy, because it also went on to find that ISAs disproportionately benefit the wealthy, and the ISA report highlights that a significant portion of ISA-related tax relief benefits higher income individuals. They said that over half of these tax breaks go to people with substantial savings, with around 1.5 million individuals holding over 100,000 in ISA accounts. They said that this concentration suggests that ISAs may not effectively encourage saving among lower income households. Now, this is where I have a problem, because not everyone with over 100k in an ISA is rich. It could be through inheritance or someone who has sacrificed a lot or worked hard to invest in an ISA, which has grown. I have over 100,000 in an ISA and I'm certainly not wealthy. The problem is, like with every government policy, they're such blanket policies. If they benefit the wealthy, then someone's total net worth should be taken into account. Someone who's got £10 million is very different to someone with 100k in an ISA. So because of this, the report proposed to cap ISAs at 100k, and it said that this would help to reallocate resources to support savings among lower income families. Again, I don't think this is a case of take you from the rich and give to the poor. It will hit the people who've worked hard to save a bit, which is no surprise there. Now, I have to say this isn't for certain. This isn't announced, and these would be very unpopular policies. But let's not forget that Thorsten Bell spearheaded this report, and he also tweeted about an ISA cap, which he later deleted, likely because of the backlash. These tweets said that ISAs work for people at the top, and at a minimum we should be capping total ISA savings at 100k. It may have been a mistake, but let's not forget it was just the same as the report outlined. I think the problem is them not really seeing what an ISA is. Okay, if you're thinking about some rich people parking some spare cash, but when you look at the stocks and shares ISA as an investment vehicle, it's a completely different question. A recent development shows that the government has its sights firmly set on the ISA landscape. Just last week, the Treasury Select Committee launched for a call for evidence on whether the lifetime ISA is fit for purpose. The product's function as a retirement savings product is one under scrutiny. The lifetime ISA is overcomplicated and confusing, so this may be a positive, but it does indicate they're looking at ISAs in general. I will mention, if you feel like you need some help sorting out your account because it is confusing, I do now have the option for mentorship and help sorting things out, as well as a full course to help you make sure you're on the right track. I've opened up a few more slots for the mentorship, as I do like to limit them so I can make sure that I work with everyone directly. I'll pop a link down below for you to check this out. Now, on top of this, there's a couple of things we can be certain he'll be been working on. In November 2024, in response to backlash from the rural community, Bell said on X that if parents pass on £3 million house, the tax due is £940,000. Yet a £3 million farm can be inherited tax-free. He called it a reminder of a significant tax advantage to farmers versus everyone else after these changes. So there's a good chance he'll be carrying through with that and other inheritance tax changes mentioned. I mean, you can tell he's definitely never been a farmer. It's also likely that he will continue with changes to triple lock on pensions, as he said it's not a sensible mechanism, and called for the government to consider alternatives. Whether his stance on policy has shifted is not yet known, but I imagine we'll find out pretty soon. Another idea of Bell's, which could be unpopular if implemented, is to do with a 25% tax-free lump sum we can currently take from our pensions. He talked about taking it down to £40,000, down from £268,275 currently, which would be a huge disruption to investment plans. He was also an advocate for a flat rate of pension tax relief, so higher earners and basic rate would get the same relief, which I do believe is more fair. Currently, higher earners are at such an advantage when it comes to pensions. Now, I do think for the most part we can assume that a lot of this will be implemented, or we can hope so anyway. He's a very smart guy who will likely have some great ideas, but it's just hoping that some of the other ideas are much more considered than these outlandish claims. The role of an MP and head of a think tank is definitely pretty different. The problem though facing the UK government right now is the fact the UK economy isn't growing and it's become very expensive for them to borrow money. This is all to do with gilts. They aren't something I talk about much here, but it's something important we understand and how they affect us. If you don't know what a gilt is, it's just a fancy word for a government bond. These are essentially IOUs for the government, and the yield or interest rate on them reflects how much investors demand to lend money to the UK government. At the moment, UK gilts are some of the highest in Europe, and that's a big deal because higher yields mean borrowing costs for the government are skyrocketing. It also means that mortgage rates stay higher for longer, and it's bad news for homeowners. It signals that investors are demanding higher returns to lend money to the UK, which isn't a great vote of confidence. So why are they so high? Well, the Bank of England hasn't really cut rates. The market expected more cuts by now, and inflation is sticking around, so rates are staying up. Debt levels are rising, and the UK government is borrowing more, and that makes investors nervous. And global markets are pricing in that risk. The US has high bond yields too, and the UK is following to suit. Compared to Europe, where the bond yield has stabilised a bit, the UK is still looking expensive, meaning that people are seeing lending to Britain as riskier, not a great look, especially when the government has plans and it still needs to grow. Since the 2008 financial crisis, real wages in the UK have barely grown. The average worker's real pay is £950 lower than in 2007. In contrast, wages in other OECD countries have grown by around £4,000 on average. Real wages in the UK are stuck at 2005 levels, meaning nearly 20 years of lost progress. And between 2007 and 2015, UK wages fell 10.4%, a decline matched only by Greece. The main reasons are weak productivity, underinvestments, and economic policies after the crisis. Fixing these issues is key to raising living standards. But the question is Britain's growth model broken? So why isn't Britain's economy growing like it should? Is it just bad luck, or is there something deeper at play? The truth is, people aren't staying or encouraged to. A really good example is ARM Holdings. You might not have heard of them, but they were a UK tech gem that packed its bags in 2016 and jetted off to the US with a price tag of $32 billion. Well, it's now strutting around Wall Street with a $155 billion valuation on the Nasdaq, and then there's DeepMind, the AI whiz kid that Google or Alphabet snapped up in 2014 for what now looks like pocket change, a mere $400 million. Fast forward a decade, and AI has supercharged Alphabet's market value to a staggering $2 trillion. Even if we assume just 10% of that is thanks to AI, that's $200 billion return on investment for Google, compared to what they originally paid for DeepMind. So let's do some quick maths, and don't worry, no spreadsheets required. ARM plus DeepMind equals over $300 billion in value gone to British investors that we totally missed out on. Gone, vanished across the Atlantic. While the US gets rich off our brainpower, UK investors are left staring at what could have been, like someone who sold their Bitcoin in 2011 for the price of a decent pub meal.
You paid 10,000 Bitcoins for one pizza?
It was 2 pizzas, actually.
What would it be worth today? $80 million, I don't know.
It's yet another case of the UK being a world-class incubator for innovation, but failing to hold on to the big wins. Maybe it's time we stopped being the talent factory for Silicon Valley and started keeping more of the spoils at home. But ARM and DeepMind didn't just up and leave the UK. They were lured away by bigger wallets and better opportunities. The US has deeper capital, higher valuations, and a tech-friendly stock market, while the UK government stood by and waved them off. ARM needed serious investment, and DeepMind needed cutting-edge resources. Both found them overseas. But in all fairness, the government is taking action. It's a shame we seem to be so late to the party, but at least it's something that is happening. The government has unveiled an ambitious plan to position the nation as a global leader in artificial intelligence. This strategy includes establishing dedicated AI growth zones to speed up planning and infrastructure, significantly increasing public computing capacity with a new supercomputer, and creating a national data library to securely unlock public data for AI advancements. How you feel about that is another question. Additionally, private tech firms have committed $14 billion in investments, expected to generate over 13,000 jobs across the country. The plan aims to revolutionize public services, boost economic growth, and enhance living standards by fully embracing AI technology. Hopefully, this will help boost the economy, which is desperately needed because at the moment we're way too reliant on financial services. The UK doesn't have a strong manufacturing base anymore like Germany, and tech companies prefer the US. That leaves London's finance sector as a big driver for growth. We also have high taxes and low investment. Businesses in the UK pay far higher corporation taxes now, and government policies aren't encouraging much private investment. In the UK's 2024 autumn budget, Chancellor Rachel Reeves announced that starting April 2025, the employer's national insurance (NI) contribution rate will rise from 13.8% to 15%, and the secondary threshold, which is the earnings level above which employers must pay national insurance, will decrease from $9,100 to $5,000. This, unfortunately, is not what we need in businesses when we're wanting them to grow. It may be an easy tax for them to claim, but unfortunately it leads to people cutting staff and making people redundant to save costs in an environment which was already not the best for businesses. They are really going to need to pull something out of the bag if they want to get growth in the UK back on track. The fact there's funds like the FTSE Developed World, excluding UK, actually exist that purposely exclude the UK and have over £14 billion invested in them, and the fact that the Popular Life Strategy funds are seen as having a negative problem because they have too much exposure to the UK is just crazy. It's embarrassing in itself. It's really frustrating that as someone from the UK, I can't rely on investing in the UK for growth, which sounds crazy to me. We should be able to invest in the UK and stand proud. I mean, what does that say for our country when our own people don't feel like we can invest in it? But that could be changing, not by our choice, but plans to unlock UK pensions for economic growth, which I think is pretty awful in itself. The UK government is looking at ways to unlock the pensions market for growth, which sounds good, right? But there's a catch. It could actually be bad news for UK investors. The UK wants pension funds to invest more in UK businesses, particularly in equity and infrastructure projects. But that's risky for a few reasons. Pension funds usually invest in safer assets, forcing them into riskier investments that could hurt long-term stability. It could also mean worse returns. If pension funds are pressured to invest into UK assets instead of picking the best global assets, returns could suffer. It could limit options for individual investors. If pensions were locked into certain investments, there could be fewer choices of where your retirement savings go. Personally, I believe that all pensions should have the option to go into a SIPP, where the person paying in has full control of what happens to their money. I get that they need more money, and long term this might be a really good play and recover the economy, but I'm not convinced they should be doing it with our money. I like to try and look on the bright side with these things. There's no point worrying about what could happen, but I think it's important we diversify our assets, in particular between an ISA and a SIPP, and I'd definitely open a lifetime ISA so you've got one if you're able to. I would almost bet money that something will happen to one of these accounts before long. Even if they don't do anything, without raising the limits, it will still hit us in one way or another. But you really shouldn't have any issue. At the moment, you can put £20,000 into an ISA and £60,000 into a pension. If you can put £80,000 into these accounts and you still need somewhere to put your money, then you're in a pretty good position. Like I say, none of this is confirmed. It's just sharing the views of what the new pension minister has been talking about. And I think it's good we just keep aware of what's going on so we aren't completely blindsided when these things happen. I've said all along that I don't think it was the autumn budget that we needed to be wary of. I think it will be the one in the spring for sure. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and if you need any help deciding between an ISA and a SIPP, I'd highly recommend checking out this video, or if you want to see how my investments are doing, this one could be a huge help, and I'll catch you over there. Thanks.